Hello and welcome. I'm Fernando, a GP in the UK. Today, we're looking at the NICE updates published in January 2025, focusing on what is relevant in primary care only. This month, there's only one area relevant to us, which is a brand new guideline on overweight and obesity management, or NG 246. This guideline consolidates and updates previous NICE recommendations on this topic. Today, I will cover general principles of care, including BMI and waist-to-height ratio and pharmacological treatments. Right, let's jump into it. As general principles of care, NICE emphasizes a person-centered approach, advocating for non-judgmental communication and tailoring advice to individual circumstances such as age, gender, cultural background, and socioeconomic status. In terms of prevention, we should provide information and practical advice on diet and exercise, particularly focusing on people at high risk because of family history or comorbidities. We will encourage self-monitoring of weight and waist measurements, but also being conscious of the risks for those who have or might develop an eating disorder. When advising about lifestyle, we will advise to avoid extreme physical activity or dietary behaviors that are difficult to sustain long term. We should explain that even small, gradual improvements to physical activity and diet are likely to be helpful. For discussions about children, we need to think about the impact of measuring their weight as well as their vulnerability to eating disorders. And for many children, we should focus on weight maintenance and growing into a healthier weight rather than weight loss. Additionally, for them, we should use age and sex-specific growth charts to visually show their weight and BMI centile. Furthermore, for children and young people, the main responsibility for behavioral changes should fall upon their families and carers, taking into account the maturity of the child and their preferences. We should also encourage them to get enough sleep, explaining that the lack of sleep may increase the risk of excess weight gain. In primary care, we should routinely assess BMI, but also waist circumference to assess central adiposity, which is linked to increased morbidity. We can classify the degree of overweight or obesity using BMI or waist-to-height ratio. In terms of BMI, overweight is a BMI of 25 to 29.9. Obesity class 1 is a BMI of 30 to 34.9. Obesity class 2 is a BMI of 35 to 39.9. And obesity class 3 is a BMI of 40 or more. People with a South Asian, Chinese, other Asian, Middle Eastern, Black African or African Caribbean background are prone to central adiposity, and their cardiometabolic risk occurs at lower BMIs. So all these thresholds should be lower. And so, overweight for them would be a BMI of 23 to 27.4, and obesity would be a BMI of 27.5 or above. For obesity classes 2 and 3, we will also reduce the thresholds by 2.5. BMI is not a perfect measurement, so we will interpret BMI with caution in people aged 65 and over, and those with high muscle mass. In children, we will use BMI centiles and standard variations. I will not go through the thresholds in detail today, but I will just mention that anything higher than the 91st centile is high. We should also encourage the calculation of waist-to-height ratio. For this, they should measure the waist circumference and height in the same units and divide the waist measurement by the height measurement. The waist-to-height ratio thresholds can be healthy when the ratio is between 0.4 and 0.49, increased when the ratio is between 0.5 and 0.59, and high when the ratio is 0.6 or more, indicating further increased health risks. Therefore, when talking to a person about the waist-to-height ratio, we should explain that they should keep their waist to less than half their height, that is, under 0.5. The waist-to-height ratio classification can be used for adults and children of both sexes and or ethnicities, including those with high muscle mass. The health risks associated with higher levels of central adiposity include type 2 diabetes, hypertension, and cardiovascular disease. And now let's have a look at the drug treatment. NICE has provided detailed guidance on medicines for weight management in adults and children. Here are the main facts. Medicines approved include orlistat, tirzepatide, semaglutide, and liraglutide. For overweight and obesity, semaglutide and liraglutide should be prescribed by secondary care only. Orlistat is taken as an oral capsule up to 3 times a day, and it can be prescribed in primary care for those with a BMI of 30 or more, or a BMI of 28 or more and associated risk factors. It should be stopped after 12 weeks if at least 5% of the initial body weight has not been lost. Tirzepatide is given as a weekly subcutaneous injection, and it is also approved to use in primary care for those with a BMI of at least 35 with at least one weight-related comorbidity. For people with a South Asian, Chinese, other Asian, Middle Eastern, Black African or African Caribbean background, the BMI threshold is reduced by 2.5 to 32.5. However, tirzepatide is subject to a gradual NHS rollout process, so there may be local variations in its availability on the NHS. If less than 5% of the initial weight has been lost after 6 months on the highest tolerated dose, we will need to decide whether to continue treatment, taking into account its benefits and risks. These drugs are not recommended during pregnancy and generally not recommended for those under 12. For children 12 and over, specialist services must be involved. Bariatric surgery is an option for people with severe obesity. NICE recommends referral for adults if a BMI is 40 or more, or the BMI is between 35 and 39.9, with significant health conditions that could improve with weight loss, such as type 2 diabetes or obstructive sleep apnea. For expedited assessments, people with a BMI of 35 or more and recent onset, that is diagnosed within the past 10 years, type 2 diabetes. And we will bear in mind that ethnic-specific adjustments will lower BMI thresholds by 2.5 for groups at higher risk of cardiometabolic complications. So that is it, a review of the NICE updates relevant to primary care. We have come to the end of this episode. Remember that this is not medical advice, but only my summary and my interpretation of the guidelines. You must always use your clinical judgment. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.